Hey, everybody, welcome to another edition of Huddle Up with Howard Richards. I'm Mike Claiborne, and we're going to talk some football for a bit. And Howard, first of all, a lot of things to discuss. Let's start off with the college scene. University of Missouri will stay close to home. Had a win against Abilene Christian. I'm not sure if they let classes out on Monday, but I think they did what they had to do because coming off the loss against Kansas State, you needed to see some improvement. How much you can assess, that's still up to be determined.
I agree. And against an FCS opponent, not taking anything away from Abilene Christian, it's not the same level of opponent as you would see throughout the SEC. And frankly speaking, Missouri did not play its best, especially along the offensive line, an area that I was less concerned about going into the season. Uh, but now suddenly this team can't run the ball, can't protect the quarterback consistently, and they're also playing undisciplined, drawing a lot of penalties. So that is an area of concern. You can't have that as much as is required to have great, at least very good offensive lines and defensive lines in this conference. Uh, the way Missouri's been playing right now, it's going to have a hard time finding wins on the schedule unless it figures out a way to elevate its play, especially on the offensive line.
Well, they'll have an interesting test against Auburn this weekend. So I'm going to remind everybody, this isn't the Auburn you once used to know. They allowed Penn State to come in their own backyard and demolish them. They've got a lot of strife going on within the athletic department. How the athletic director was fired. The head football coach was almost fired last year, so he's on very thin ice. And they haven't recruited as well as they thought they should, especially when you're in the same state as the University of Alabama. So, having said all that, Missouri shouldn't go in thinking we can play them tough. Missouri has to go in saying we can beat these guys.
If we play up to our capabilities. And through 3 weeks of this young college football season, Missouri hasn't done that. I really thought, and I based, not that I actually make predictions on how many wins or losses this team uh, would achieve this season, but easily I saw 8 wins. But that was based on this team playing much more consistent football in all areas. Based on what I've seen, I'm going to have to retract that unless they show me something, unless there's a big turnaround here. Um, so it's going to take, I think, max effort in all areas. Now, one advantage that Missouri may have is the familiarity with Brian Harsin. Certainly, Eli Drinkwitz was hired by Harsin. I think they coached together at a couple different stops at Arkansas State and at Auburn, along with Blake Baker, who also worked for Brian Harsin. So that may work to the Tigers' advantage. Also, given the fact that TJ Finley, the Auburn starting quarterback, will be out with an injury. So you don't know if you're going to see uh, the backup Robbie Ashford or Zach Calzada, the Texas A&M transfer who actually played against Missouri last year and beat Missouri as a starting quarterback. You don't know who you're going to see, but Missouri's got to be prepared for whoever it is at quarterback. But in order for Missouri to do anything with regard to winning, it's got to take care of its own issues, shoring up that offensive line, um, cleaning up missed tackles, and getting some pressure on the quarterback.
Well, they have their work cut out for them. And I think we're at that point now where there's some other programs who have to make a decision on what direction and who they really are. Because we're running out of non-conference games where we don't really learn a lot about each other. But now we're starting to get into part of the SEC schedule. So, and Missouri's not by themselves. You can look. I can find you a team in every conference. excuse me. That's not sure who they are. Certainly when you look at the Big Ten, you look at Nebraska in that situation, which is a
Mm,
mess.
yeah.
You got a couple of programs in the SEC that are kind of trying to find their way. And it's one of those times now where everybody's trying to figure out, okay, just who are we? Because the fans don't have the patience that they used to. That's been proven. And Notre Dame is another example. So where do you go from here? And I think that's something that comes from not just the coach, but you better have a good AD and a good president who can back you when these boosters want your head.
No doubt. But ultimately, the only thing that I think cures a restless fan base is turning bad play into wins, and really that's the bottom line in the measuring stick. How you measure all these coaches, along with getting people in your stands. So now Missouri played at home last week against Abilene Christian, and the announced crowd was about 53,000 and some change, which was the largest crowd or among the largest crowds that this team has played in front of over the last few years. So that's a start. That's a trend. But it's only going to continue on that upward trajectory if this team continues to win and play better. Certainly, the excitement of Luther Burden and the emergence of Dominic Lovett certainly helped what the fans were able to see, and you hope that trend continues. You hope that they continue to work well together with quarterback Brady Cook.
You talk about Burden, and everybody does. In your opinion, how many times does he need to touch the ball in a game? And for whether it's punt return, being in a wide out position, what's a good reasonable number?
Well, if you just look at last week, I'd say 4 punt returns. I think he ran the ball maybe twice or 3 times and was targeted about 6 times. Maybe you're looking at 10 to 14, maybe more, depending on how teams play. But I'd say probably no fewer than 10 opportunities to get him the ball. Now, his success hasn't really been in the passing game. And that's an
Yeah.
area I think where he certainly needs to grow the most. But that's also coordination with the rest of your offense and the quarterback. He was electrifying on the punt return. He took it back and ran it back 78 yards. Certainly want to see more of that. I know he's still working with being able to field punts more cleanly instead of allowing them to bounce in front of him. But that's just one of those things that you got to put the time in and effort and become sure of yourself, because there's an art to doing that. Not
No
everyone
doubt.
is cut out to run back punts. So listen, I would say if you can get him a minimum opportunity to touch the ball 10 times, then your chances of winning go up. I'd say exponentially.
All right, let's talk about the rest of college football. Do we know who the clear cut top teams are yet, or are we going by what the rankings say? Because I think the rankings have showed to be flawed because of some of the teams they ranked early who now find themselves with one loss and either out of the top 10 or out of the top 25.
I can almost certainly tell you who probably the number one team is, and it's a team that Missouri will face on October 1st, and that's the Georgia Bulldogs. They seem to be playing, as well as they've ever played. Kirby Smart has just done a good job, even with all the players that Georgia lost last year. It's like the hopper is never empty. So
Mhm.
kudos to what he's been able to do with his program. Beyond that, I just don't know. I mean, Alabama is still strong, but just look at the Texas game. Did Texas play lights out, or did Alabama play down to Texas? Don't really know. But I think we'll begin to see what type of team Alabama has. And and you probably would never do this either. Never bet against a Nick Saban led team.
Oh no, no
Um,
sir.
Too many people have been burned by doing so. But they're certainly the top two teams in the SEC, in both the West with Alabama and the East with Georgia. Beyond that, I'm not sure, and I don't even know about the Big Ten. But you saw what Penn State did to Auburn on the road last week. Is Penn State a team on the rise in the Big Ten? Can they compete with Michigan and Ohio State? Just don't know. But I think what we've seen, we've talked about this on the earlier show, with the presence of the transfer portal, with I'd say probably name, image, and likeness, those teams that were towards the bottom and in the middle are starting to, I think, um, converge together. There's more of a muddle among those teams um, that are trying to compete with those teams at the top, which makes the rest of college football that much more interesting. You've seen the number of upsets that we've seen over the past couple of weeks. And I think in a lot of ways that is exciting for college football.
One name that we haven't talked about is Deion Sanders and what he's doing at Jackson State, kind of putting that program on the map. Is he a guy that should be considered for some of these other jobs? And I won't say for big time college football. I just think that that's an unfair statement. But maybe some of the more recognizable names in college football that are looking for coaches, because and the reason why I say that is uh, when Nebraska had their problems, they already had their picks with Matt Campbell.
Mhm.
Somebody had the gall to bring up Urban Meyer's name. Are we at the point now where Deion should be considered in some of those same voices?
I read an article earlier this week. I'm not sure if it was in the Athletic or the USA Today, but the writer basically said that Deion Sanders should be if not the top, he should be among the top candidates for coaching jobs. And he mentioned specifically replacing Herm Edwards at Arizona State.
Yeah,
Um, Now you can look at what Dion has done. He has created a lot of buzz and excitement at Jackson State, and his record is pretty good from the time that he's been there. How does that equate at the Power Five level? I don't know. Now Deion Sanders is a very, as you know, he's an accomplished athlete and has played both pro baseball and pro football. He's gotten the top recruit to come to Jackson State. But where are the other pieces? Yeah, they're playing well. Can that translate at the higher level? I'm not going to say it doesn't, but I don't know that we're all ready to say that it does. I would venture to say though, with Sanders' experience and expertise at the collegiate level and playing professionally, I would not bet against him either. I think probably he should deserve a shot. The guy's charismatic, and if he could walk into a parent's home and say, I can coach your child up to be, on the level. At least he will have the skill set and the understanding that I had at Florida State, or whether was playing with the Dallas Cowboys or the 49ers. That is something hard to turn down as a parent when you got this guy in your living room telling you that. It's very enticing, and if he can convince some administrator, some college chancellor, president, athletic director that he's got the guy and he can bring in a solid set of coaches to do that, then listen, why wouldn't he get a shot to do that? And it's all smoke and mirrors. Well, let me just say that it's not smoke and mirrors, but no one knows until you actually see the product on the field. So anyone can interview well, and I'm not saying this is the case with Dion, but I think Dion could probably do as well as a number of other coaches that have been giving big time opportunities at other institutions.
let's move on to the NFL. I found that the NFL for fans is more about players and their fantasy teams compared to actual teams. You have people who already talk about early season MVPs and the team to beat. Man, there's a lot of football left. But who do you think has gotten off to a good start, and who do you think, because of the way teams are viewed, and especially players, have themselves probably backed into a corner before they even knew how big the room was?
Well, listen to the Philadelphia Eagles, a team that, boy, they destroyed the Titans the other night. Um, I think that receiving core has really stepped up. Jalen Hurts seems to be much more comfortable at the quarterback position. The Eagles' offensive line is widely assumed to have the best one in the National Football League, certainly among the best. Um, Comparing that with what the my Cowboys have, you would probably give a
Oh
slight
boy.
edge to the Eagles to maybe win the division.
Oh, I like
Um,
them to win the division,
yeah,
especially when Dak Prescott goes down.
yeah. Now Cooper Rush, of course, went 1-0, and he's 2-0 as a starter at Dallas. But those are small windows. How can he sustain that over the course of a number of weeks, and that remains to be seen. Um, Teams that surprised me, the 49ers. But guess what? They're right back where they were with the injury to Trey Lance and Jimmy Garoppolo back at the quarterback helm. So does he give them more quarterback than Trey Lance? I think that's going to be an interesting situation to watch in San
Let me
Francisco.
let me ask you this. Jimmy Garoppolo is a guy that I think gets maligned. Why do you think people are so wishy-washy on him? I mean, he doesn't lose games as much as I think people want to portray him to be. I think he's a serviceable guy. I'm not going to blame him because somebody thought he was worth a whole lot of money. But where do you think the disconnect is with him?
Could be that, he started in the shadow of Tom Brady, and anyone that backs up Brady, the expectation is he's going to be just like Brady. And that's rarely the case with any backup that has backed up Brady. Um, but I think people have to understand that the quarterback, even though he's an important piece to your team and certainly your offense, he's only one piece. You've got to build around that quarterback. And no matter what level you're playing in football, Mike, you've got to be able to run the football.
Oh
Starts with
yeah.
your offensive line. There are no mysteries here. You have to have those pieces. Your quarterback's got to have weapons. And, the 49ers haven't had a bevy of weapons. Yeah, they have Deebo Samuel, who has been a tremendous find out of South Carolina. But who else have they had, that's been able to consistently get it done for them? And their defense is, they've played well at times, and other times they've been down, which is why they, are in the situation that they're in. But Garoppolo, listen, if Trey Lance is your starter and he goes down, I'd be pretty happy with Jimmy Garoppolo because he's taken him to a Super Bowl. He's already proven he can do that.
I think that's the key that everybody needs to pay attention to. Lamar Jackson, I know he was a big discussion at the beginning of the season because he didn't sign a contract and everybody wanted to malign him because he didn't have an agent. He was negotiating it himself, he and his mother, and they have an advisor. But, I watched him the other day. And I'm trying to figure out what's wrong with this guy, other than the fact he doesn't have a defense to play with. Are we starting to see some of these guys getting called out for the wrong reasons because we have as many good quarterbacks in this league as we've ever had. And I think sometimes the onus is put on them for all the wrong reasons because on some of the reasons you just touched on, lack of running game, offensive line, and it doesn't hurt to have a defense to keep where you're not out on the field or you don't get out on the field as much as you need to. But I think some of these quarterbacks are already catching heat for all the wrong reasons.
I agree. And whether you blame the media, whether you blame the fan base, or whether you blame a combination of those in the organization, you've always got to be in your mindset of rebuilding. And where your weaknesses are at the end of the season. And why do you not direct your focus on improving those weaknesses? Again, that's probably been the case with Lamar Jackson. He has an interesting throwing motion. The guy can get the ball downfield. He can run it, but you don't always want your quarterback having to run the football. It's just this league, especially now with an additional game on the schedule, 17 weeks now. There's just too many opportunities for your quarterback to get hurt. And just go down to Dallas. You've seen that with Dak Prescott. And you've also seen a team that didn't address needs at the receiver position and at the offensive line. And although they're 1-1 now, how does that translate without Tyron Smith and without Dak Prescott for however long he's going to be out? You just don't know, and that's why I think it's just imperative if you've got a person that understands it at the general manager position and you trust him, then allow that guy to do your job because he can make those moves. And there may not be the best moves for your team, but I think they're better than doing nothing, which is what it seems that the Cowboys have done. And the teams that have been successful over the course of a number of years are the ones that have all of those things in place. You've got a general manager that understands the landscape of personnel in this league. And, they go about their business in that way, always trying to find the next piece, the next backup, or the guy that can ascend from the practice squad or a backup into that starting role and be effective.
We got some interesting games this weekend in the NFL. Rams are going to be in Arizona. I think Arizona is a team that really needs to find themselves quickly. I think Tampa Bay, Green Bay. I mean, Brady and Rodgers represent two good teams. Then you have San Francisco and Denver. Russell Wilson's gotten off to a little bit of a slow start. Mm-hmm. San Francisco's going to unveil Garoppolo. And then the Monday night game, I don't know why that's even going to be on Monday night. The Giants hosting the Cowboys because neither one of them is very exciting right now. But there are going to be some teams I think are going to be 0-3, and their season is going to be in peril.
Well, we know the Dallas won't be 0-3 because they managed to win one. But going against the Giants, Saquon Barkley is back.
Yeah.
Is that game at AT&T Stadium?
Oh no, it's in New York.
It's in New York. So
MetLife.
so that
Yeah, MetLife
that
Stadium.
that actually might be an advantage for Dallas to get on the road. AT&T Stadium has not been what you would
Yeah.
consider home field advantage for this team. So they've been able to go on the road and have their way with the Giants. And sometimes it's just good to get out of Big D and just let the chips fall where they may. Listen, Barkley, I would never discount them. Dallas didn't look as stout as they had last year against the run. So you might give a slight edge to the Giants because of the fact that Prescott is out. But listen, that defense led by Michael Parsons, he is going
Whew.
to try to have a field day. He's going to try to make the fans in the Meadowlands or MetLife Stadium forget about number
Lawrence Taylor.
56. No
There you
doubt.
go.
No
He's,
doubt.
you know what? He reminds me so much of Taylor, the way he plays the edge. But I also am impressed with how he plays the run too. So
Yeah.
you're right. I think that's going to be a good statement maker. And the other game, while both teams are trying to find their way, Pittsburgh's at Cleveland. That's the Amazon game on Thursday night. Uh, Two teams that they better figure it out quick. And I think one of the things with Pittsburgh is everybody knew Pittsburgh was going to struggle. Well, they battled in both games they've been in, and I think Mike Tomlin has a lot to do with that. When you look at Cleveland, they're waiting on one guy to save their season, and that may be too late. But they don't have an excuse because they still have good weapons, especially on the offense that they have not. And really, when you think of Myles Garrett being one of the best players in the game defensively, they've got enough moving pieces in order to make themselves more competitive. What we've seen in the first 2 weeks of the season.
Well, you mentioned Pittsburgh and you mentioned Cleveland. And what do they have in common? They got quarterback issues. Even
Yep.
though Trubisky was acquired to be that guy, I don't think Trubisky was the guy that everyone really coveted. And I don't know if you see the rookie backup at some point this season out of the University of Pittsburgh eventually become a starter or at least garner some
But he's
significant
gonna get
playing
some
time.
time. I
Yeah,
think the pressure will be too great for him not to get the time if Trubisky just is a game manager. They'll find somebody else to do that. Hey
yeah.
Howard, we're out of time, sir. As always, the Huddle Up show comes your way every week, and we appreciate your time. And we'll have some pretty interesting things to discuss, if not a good guest for next week. So we invite everybody to stay tuned for that. He's Howard Richards. I'm Mike Claiborne. This has been another edition of Huddle Up with Howard on ClaibsOnline.com.